Hello guys, welcome to Elderbrain's channel. We try something new this time. This is Mind Blast, a series that we would like to start and develop as it goes, where we discuss creating, like basically we discuss our favorite hobby from a creative perspective, and discuss all the little details, maybe give some advice, maybe learn from each other, hopefully learn from each other. And we have 5 topics for today with Mike, who's also known as Sly Flourish.
Hello.
And hello. I would like to ask Tommy to give a brief introduction of Elderbrain so that we can start with that, and then please, Mike, take over and introduce yourself briefly.
Great. So, hi, Tommy here. I'll be super brief. So, Elderbrain, our company. It started as a love project that turned serious over the years. We do Kickstarters. We make adventures based on community surveys, such as Crown of the Oathbreaker, Torrents of the Spellhoarder, and our upcoming adventure Scepter of the Lightbringer.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, it's coming soon.
Coming soon.
I'm getting new news right away.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Mike, who are you?
So I am Mike Shea. I run the website Sly Flourish and write books about role-playing games, including Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, the one I'm probably most known for. I write books of tips and tricks to help people run and prep their games, and then also write adventures and source books and other kinds of more fiction-oriented stuff to give people material they can actually use during those games. Those are kind of the two types of products that I make. I also do YouTube videos and podcasts, and I have a weekly newsletter, and what else? I don't know, lots of other things. Just started selling coffee cups.
Anything coming soon?
Yeah. So I'm working on. Thank you. You say it right at the beginning. So I'm working on a project right now called The City of Arches, which is a high fantasy city source book for lazy GMs. Kind of, mostly probably 90% system agnostic. So you could use it with pretty much anything, but certainly I have 5e in mind, large 5e. So 5e from the standpoint of Tales of the Valiant or Level Up Advanced 5e, 2014 D&D or 2024 D&D, all the different versions of 5e that we're going to have.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a book that would be useful for those systems and for pretty much any other system. If you wanted to play Shadowdark or something else, you certainly could. I have been writing it on Patreon for about 2 years now. I've been doing little bits of it over time as Patreon rewards for about 2 years, and people have been running it and playing it, and I've been getting feedback the whole time. So the Kickstarter, I've been now we're in earnest making it. My longtime partner and editor Scott Gray has been going through, and we've been digging into it deeply, and we're getting page layout done, and we've commissioned and received tons of art for it. So the Kickstarter should hopefully be in the next couple of months, 2 or 3 months for the Kickstarter.
Exciting.
And then
we'll let everyone know about it.
It should be, knock on wood, should be smooth sailing to actually get the product out, because we're way ahead of the game when it comes to actually building the product itself. So that's the thing I've got.
Are you self-publishing it?
Yes. So it's going to be an offset print, but I'm not running it. I'm running it, kind of publishing it the same way I've published my previous stuff, Return and Companion and whatever book I did last, Forge of Foes. So same way. Yeah.
Very all right. So good to hear and very exciting. I guess you do a lot. It eats up lots of your time, because it always does for us.
Sure.
And thank you for putting us into your schedule for this conversation, which actually you inspired. Because thank you, because you inspired this whole thing, because you asked questions when you introduced our book just recently, and Torrents of the Spellhoarder, and you raised questions, and we all decided to discuss them. So let me go with the first question immediately. It was your question. What sorts of adventures work for us, and how do we build them as designers? How do you do that?
So it's interesting, because you can kind of look at it from 2 different angles, right? I am I am first and foremost a player of role-playing games, right? Before I published books on them, before I did anything, I was running games, and I'm still running lots of games. So recently, I had kind of a nice introspective, uh, moment where I looked back at 10 years of campaigns that I've run. I think I don't remember how many it was. It was more than 20. Some different campaigns that I've run, and thinking about what kinds of material helped me run those games, like what made them fun for me, what worked, what didn't. And I don't think there was any like one super clear, this is the kind of product that makes me run great adventures, and these are the kinds of products that don't. Even the structures of published adventures were kind of all over the place. Like my top four, I think, or top 4 or 5 included both like Wizards of the Coast published adventures and really lightweight adventures like Shadowed Keep on the Borderlands by Raging Swan. And they're like, you set them next to each other, they don't look anything alike. Or the Gloaming, the Curse Scroll one, the Gloaming from Kelsey Dion over at Arcane Library was another one of my, S tier campaigns. And that doesn't look anything like Curse of Strahd does, right? When you look at Curse of Strahd side by side with that, they're not anything alike. But for me, the some of the common elements, there was a couple things that I discovered, and one of them was that the production quality didn't have to be absolutely through the roof for me to still get a lot of value out of it. And I'm not knocking Raging Swan and Arcane Library for Shadow Keep of the Borderlands or Curse Scroll, but they are, when you sit them side by side with like, Vecna Eve of Ruin, right, the most recent Wizards of the Coast adventure, like the art budget between those two are totally in different playing fields. And yet I would still find more value out of something like Shadow Keep of the Borderlands because of what it offers me as a GM to actually prepare and run my games. That was probably a surprising result for me. And sad for those of us that spend tons and tons of money on art, like I think Elderbrain does, given the quality of the Elderbrain products I've seen, right?
Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, please.
No, I just wanted to add, and sorry for an interruption, that we enjoyed the games when it was, all the black and white, old school, the same way, because it was in our heads, and we, most of it is in our heads. So those really, praise our illustrators. They are gods of their art. But that scene is just one of those many scenes. I'm always telling Tommy, like, dude, we should illustrate like everything. I can't get enough of it, but it's mostly in your head. So these just help, and of course, to show quality, we make them very beautiful and detailed and everything. But yeah, it was all in our head all the time. So
yeah, it's interesting. There's a writer that I was reading recently who was writing about the importance of leaving blanks in fiction, and he was kind of talking about it from the point of view of like movies and other stories, but he did mention role-playing games, and the idea that like, and we're gonna go with Star Wars nerds. Are you both Star Wars nerds of some degree?
Of course. Of course we are, man.
Sure, you never know. So like Boba Fett was a lot cooler before we found out that his dad was Jango Fett and that he was like the leader of all the clones and all that. And then we're like, well, now he's not quite as cool as he used to be. Like, as good as Book of Boba Fett is, like, it was more interesting when we didn't know who he was.
I love Darth Vader way better before it turned out he was born out of this inception of the Force. Like, what?
Darth Vader's Jesus? Right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
evil Jesus.
Right. It was cooler, and that for those, I'm not a huge fan, and I'm not going to knock the people who are huge fans of episode 1, 2, and 3. We each get to love what we love. Yeah. But having grown up not having any idea what the Clone Wars was, my idea for the Clone Wars was better than the one that was shown in the movies. And I think that's true for a lot of times where we have these blanks. And I think good role-playing game products probably have a good way of leaving some of those blanks. I introduced an NPC to some patrons of mine that I have in City of Arches, whose name is Jocelyn Halfcloak. And they were like, why is her last name Halfcloak? Like, where did that come from? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, I don't have to come up with and then they immediately started running off with, with backstories on where the name Halfcloak came from. And I'm like, great, like yours is better than mine, right? Like, I guarantee what you come up with for you is better than what I would come up for you. So I think that there's something to like I've managed to squeeze 30 sessions so far, and we're not even done yet, out of like 14 pages of text that came in Curse Scroll 1 for the gloaming. And I'm probably 20, I don't know if I'm that far, 15 or 20 sessions into running a campaign using Shadowed Keep of the Borderlands, where that book is supposed to be for levels 1 to 5, and my characters are level 7, and or I guess my characters are like 6th, and they just got to the adventure, right? So I ran so much other stuff for them from inspired by the book, that I'm way past the scale of the book, right? And yet it's still considered for me like a top tier adventure. And then the ones that have dropped kind of to the bottom of the list mostly come with the one thing that I notice about those, and this is something that I was pretty conscious of, is anytime I run into an adventure where I feel like I have to fix the structure of the adventure to make it work at all, that drops it, quite quickly into the lower tiers. Like, and there's a very fine line between wanting to change an adventure because it's fun, right, and having to because there's just no way I want to run what's on the page, right? There's some structural thing. And an example I'll bring up is like, it never made sense to me that Auril, the god of winter, is walking around in Icewind Dale but is only CR 11. Right? And you're like, she's a goddess. Like, even the little intro script talks about how Auril is a goddess and that you shouldn't be just expecting to face her and win. She should be CR 30, right? Like, there's no other there's no other point where she shouldn't be anything other than CR 30.
Or it's a weaker avatar. I have to admit I've never read the new Icewind Dale story.
I did.
You're not missing a lot. So so there's and I'm picking on that one, but there's other kinds of things where the way the adventures are written are too rigid and have fundamental building blocks that, in my opinion, like, good GMs know better. I feel like I'm picking one that has had me all riled up for a while now is Vecna Eve of Ruin. I was looking forward to it. I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. And I pre-ordered the special edition copy at my local game shop, and I was excited. And then luckily I had the chance to read it before I actually got it. And there is like a fundamental plot point in there that I would never recommend a DM ever do, right? It's like, it's on my list of like, don't run adventures like this because, you're betraying the trust of your players. And it's fundamental to the nature of that adventure. And I'm like, well, I'm canceling my pre-order. Right? Like, I'm not even going to try.
What is that? Can you please?
I will spoil it, right? If give spoiler tags for everybody who is ever going to run Vecna Eve of Ruin, just to be sure. Because it is the kind where, like, in 3 words, you can ruin the entire adventure. And those 3 words are Mordenkainen is cause. So it turns out that one of the 3, your major quest NPC, the guy who is sending you on all of these missions to go to all of these worlds to pick up all of these pieces of the Rods of 7 Parts, is actually the bad guy. And you don't actually need to get the Rod of 7 Parts in order to face Vecna. And he's going to steal it from you pretty much no matter what once you've completed building the whole rod. And then he's going to go off, and then you've got to chase him too. And it's the whole adventure, right? It's like the whole point. And they have all of these like really ham-fisted descriptions of like how you can, somebody might find out that that Mordenkainen is actually cause. And it's like DC 30, multiple DC 30 investigation checks to figure it out. And he's got this magic crown that clearly was designed just to say, yeah, we know that this is an adventure for high-level characters, but none of their high-level character stuff would work in order to see that he's actually the bad guy. Because if he did, the adventure is over, right? The minute you find out that the main guy is like, I need you to go to all these worlds to pick up these Rods of 7 Parts, the parts of the Rods of 7 Parts, you'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. You're a bad guy. Right? Like, why would I do that?
This is a very interesting point that might come up later in our discussions, how to hide all of these things. For when you asked about the high level adventures where you have access to legend lore and all these spells, how to protect the antagonist or villain from spilling the information or getting the information out of it, him, her. But also this is very strange because I didn't read Ruin of Vecna. I'm sorry to say, but I don't read much. I just write. But the bottleneck of what you just mentioned, that he steals it. I mean, how do they pull that off? How is that so inevitable? How is it inevitable?
So
Because
it's God,
there's
it's
a
terrible. So
thousand options of
right.
going
and
against
at the
that.
end, it says like, okay, now you collected the rod, you go back to the sanctum where the wizards 3 are there. The idea is there's 3 wizards that have kind of sent you in all these quests, and 2 of the 3 don't know that the third is a bad guy, even though they're all 20th level wizards, right? And they have no way of knowing that this guy that's standing right next to him is actually this villain, because he's got a super special crown that protects him from everything. And it's even got like stuff like if you send a message, it intercepts the message and sends it to the wrong guy. Rather than the right guy, because there's actually there's 2 Mordenkainens up there, right? Yeah, it's really bad. Like it's clearly like they spent a lot of time designing an item just to screw people.
Yeah.
And but anyway, at the very end, it's like he comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm going to need to take that rod from you so I can go do like investigations on it."
So you
and then it has this write-up that says, "And if the players are apprehensive, one of the other wizards will come and say, 'No, you really need to give it to him so that he can do his investigations and stuff.'" And then you give it, and then they're like, "Oh, it turned out it was the bad guy, and he stole it," right? And you're like, "You freaking told me to give it to him," right?
Yeah.
Like, how dumb are you?
I think Wizards need to step up their game, because this is bad design, and bad design put them into the position where they had to create this item and had to pull off this very, very bad bottleneck.
Somewhere, and I don't know that I even blame. Like I've recognized the same thing. Like other adventures that were like really low on my list that they've published, like Descent into Avernus is another one, and Rime of the Frost Maiden, and this one. I can't put this in a tier because I'm not going to run it. So I don't. There are other adventures too that I haven't run, so I can't really judge them completely. But in those cases, like I don't blame the designers necessarily. It's not like a designer sat down and just came up with a bad idea and then ran with it. It's because the public. I believe that it's because of the publication process that they have at Wizards of the Coast, and scheduling, and tight timelines, and weird review cycles, and not fantastic playtesting things, that there's a systemic issue.
You're giving them excuses, mate. I mean,
I'm not, because I know it for certain, because I know personally the designers of Descent into Avernus, and I know what happened behind the scenes of them making that one, and they are fantastic designers who knew better and didn't put in the things that ended up causing that problem. And I think that I don't know them personally, but I know the work of the designers of Rime of the Frost Maiden, and I know that that's not the case either, right? That like a lot of times especially when you're bringing in freelance designers to do stuff, the system that goes on behind the scenes to build it is fundamentally broken. Now, I will say somebody came up with the idea that we should have Kaz actually be Mordenkainen and be the bad guy, and somebody else had to make that true, right? And so I have a feeling that in some kind of design Bible early on, somebody made that be the case. And then later on in development, they realized how problematic that was going to be, and then had to write reams of text to try to make that still be the case, because it was too late for them to say, maybe that's a terrible idea and we should change the structure of this adventure so it doesn't have to hinge on the betrayal of a single NPC.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I don't blame. And what's another one? So another one is and again, it's another adventure that I didn't run, but it has the same problem. Is the one from Planescape. I forget the name. I don't have it on hand, somewhere around here. But there's a Planescape adventure, and it also hinges on a quest NPC who actually just wants to get you killed. And so if you found out what this quest NPC, and it's right in the beginning, right? It's early on in the adventure. It's almost the exact same kind of place that it is in Vecna. It's another one who's like, they're the main bad guy. They're trying to send you off to get killed. And only through happenstance do you actually uncover the actual situation. And then at the end, you face them in the betrayal. And that's another one where, like, I know the designer who made that adventure, and I know that they know better, right? I know that they have designed fantastic ones. In fact, the designer who's like the lead designer of that product also is one of the 2 designers who made the product that fixed Descent into Avernus and made it playable as a third-party publisher. So, I think that I think one conclusion I can come to with this is that small publishers or more focused publishers have a better ability to build great adventures than a giant corporation that has all of the other kind of layers of corporate stuff going on, for them to be able to put out solid adventures.
Of course. I have to say, there hasn't been, I think, an adventure that we played that we didn't have to fix, and especially wizard stuff, because we
Wizard
played
stuff.
mostly wizard stuff and
Paizo stuff is more on point, I think. More
Yeah.
balanced, more thought over, more structured,
but no,
more stable.
perfect example is the Waterdeep heist, which
Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
which you
another
DM'd.
one that I had friends that worked on that one, right? Like I know the
Yeah.
guys that worked on it, and still has like the most ham-fisted chase right in the center of it, and also is it the heist?
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
for a book
Which
called
I totally skipped when I was DMing it because
Yeah,
it was,
right. I did too. And there's
it's
actually a
just-
really easy way to change it into an investigation,
yeah, it was
so
too
that you're
rare
following the
already.
path of this thing that disappeared, and you get to go kind of investigate where it went, rather than you having to have this like, oh, the stone. And it's another one, and it's just like Vecna, where they wrote a section that said, if the characters get the stone too early, the stone doesn't want to be found and will do what it can to try to get
Yeah,
out of the hands of the characters so that they can only pick it up later. And you're like,
yeah,
even the MacGuffin is trying to run away,
yeah.
right? Like it was really, really, not great. And again, I had the opportunity to talk to the designers who worked on it. Like, yeah, that wasn't how we did it.
Yeah.
Right? Like something happened somewhere and it changed.
We defined what we don't like. You
Yeah.
kind of said what you like, but how do you build one yourself?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. So one thing, and I City of, I'm gonna City of Arches because it's in my head. But I'll talk about like other ones too, is I try to design the kind of things I would want to buy as a product.
Of course.
And one thing I've decided is that I have never written a big adventure path, right? I haven't written any like major large campaign adventure. The fantastic, so the three books of adventures two books of adventures that I've written are Sly Flourish's Fantastic Adventures and Fantastic Adventures Ruins of the Grendel Route. And the closest to a campaign came from Ruins of the Grendel Route, where it was 10 subterranean adventures built around one location called Deep Delver's Enclave. And 5 of those 10 could be run in an order. So they were first to fifth level adventures. I think they would end at 6th level. And 5 of them could be chained together into a kind of a mini adventure path, right? Not a huge one, right? It's only first to 6th. But it also had sort of the fundamental kind of idea that existed as in this book was reinforced by these 5 adventures.
Mhm.
And I've had people who have run long campaigns in that setting. They like the main setting. I threw a lot of other sort of lore and history and kind of like loose source book style stuff. I actually have a 5th to 20th level campaign outline in the book, so that people who wanted to take it all the way to the end had a path that they could follow or ideas that they could grab onto to build out the rest of their campaign from it. But I didn't spell out those adventures. And I think for the people, it was a slow burn product. Like it did fine. It funded itself, but it didn't like blow the doors off. And I had always kind of like looked at it, and I don't know, maybe I just didn't hit the mark. But then it kind of picked up some steam. And later I get lots of feedback from people who are like, oh yeah, no, I'm running it now and I love it, and I'm running a campaign there and I love it. And so it kind of, built up over time as the kind of product that certain people really liked. Fantastic Adventures did not have any kind of campaign connection. It was just 10 adventures set from 1st to 5th level in a kind of a generic fantasy area, with the intention that it was a book of short adventures. It was a book of adventures
Like
that you could run
separate,
in a couple of
standalone?
sessions. Yeah, pretty much standalone adventures. But they were all set around this town.
So
They did have an area so that, like, again, if somebody wanted to run, and I did, right, when I was playtesting it and running it, I ran them as a bunch of different little adventures that the characters could go on while they're in the town. And that actually continues to sell pretty well. I look back at it and I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff I'd love to fix in that. But people really dig it, and they're
Good to hear.
straightforward adventures. They're simple adventures. They're low level, which I think is helpful because
yeah,
they're easier for people
easy
to
to
kind of drop into
handle.
their
Yeah.
games. Yeah, right. Like it's hard to like make them really unbalanced or have them have characters come in and completely wreck them. because of certain things that they picked up at high levels when you know the characters aren't going to be higher than 5th level.
Mike,
Then-
how do you create these? How do you start from scratch? What's your process?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was your question. How do we create them? So I throw it back at you.
Oh no!
We will tell you
Right,
we will
what
tell
did
you
I
also
do?
how we
What
do
did I
it.
do? Yeah.
Do you want us to go first and then give you an
No, I'll
example?
go.
Go ahead.
No, sure. Yeah, no, I've been talking for a half hour. So
No. You can if you have it constructed and you can.
Yeah,
you can,
sure. So,
go ahead.
I mean, so I usually, so the funny thing is they do not come from the campaigns that I run. I haven't said like, oh, I'm running, and I think a lot of designers, a lot of kind of independent designers probably, I don't know what the, I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels, I've heard certainly that people have their own homebrew setting that they like. Because from polls and surveys that I've run, roughly half of, and you guys have run a bunch of polls on this, so you probably know better than I do. And maybe I'm going to say it, and then you tell me if you have a
A
different.
lot of 50% homebrew. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. 50% homebrew. Okay, so good. We have data from two different angles that are.
Yeah, and we match them, and they match, and they are same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're true.
Right. So about half of the people are running homebrew adventures, and I think we kind of recognize that people, GMs who are really into their hobby, are also kind of designers, right? They're kind of already designing their own stuff. They're already into that, thinking about mechanics and thinking about adventures, and they get excited about it. And now we live in a world where it's not too difficult to get a product in front of people, even if it's like I took my Word document and saved as PDF and made it available on the internet. So a lot of designers, I think, start with my home campaign, their home campaign, and then grow it out. And one that's like a good example would be Monty Cook's Tolis campaign, which I think is the second largest role-playing game book that I have, next to Crown of the Oathbreaker by you guys. So Tolis is like 600 pages. It's enormous, right? And that was Monty Cook's homebrew campaign that he designed for the 3rd edition of D&D when he was brought on as the designer of the 3rd edition. So that was almost like a homebrew setting that became a published setting. That actually is a pretty big setting. But I didn't do that. So when I did Fantastic Adventures and I did Ruins of the Grendel Route, and when I started with City of Arches, I had kind of a product in mind from the beginning. I knew I had heard very common complaints early on in the beginning of the 5th edition days that Wizards of the Coast is putting out these great big campaign adventures. Nobody can actually get through them all. This was back when they were doing 2 of them a year as well. So they were doing like, they did like the first 4 adventures that came out for 5th edition had new ones coming out every 6 months, and nobody could get through them all. Like literally people that were running weekly 4-hour games exclusively focused
we
on
know
this,
the
but
struggle.
not finish them. Yeah, they could not finish them.
We know.
So, and Wizards eventually stopped and said, okay, we're going to do like 1 a year, right? And which seemed to work a little bit better, and it made sense. But there was a big complaint that there weren't standalone adventures, that there wasn't like a place where you could get good, well-published, well-produced, well-play-tested, good artwork, all the stuff that you needed, but we're only like 1 session or 2 session adventures instead of these great big campaign settings. So I said, okay, Fantastic Adventures is going to be the opposite of that. Fantastic Adventures, I'm going to have a starting town. It's going to be a town that you could drop into any fantasy role-playing game. I'm not going to build a whole campaign world. It's just this town and the regions around it. And the regions are like, hey, there's a desert and there's rivers and there's a water area and there's a swamp, all the kind of locations that you'd need in order to drop in typical adventures. And I'm going to write 10 adventures. And so I sat down and that in that case, I don't know if I started doing this, but I do it now where these days I would say, okay, I'm going to come up with 30 ideas and then I'm going to cut down that list of 30 until we like what we've got left. Until I like what I've got left. And I did that for Ruins of the Grendel Route when I was partnering with Scott Gray and James Intercasso on Fantastic Lairs. We did that. We had, I think, 30 or 40 different lair ideas and then cut them down to the 23 that we ended up in the book. And that was a good process because like we really, in some cases we'd look at like, man, it's really good. It's just not as good as these other ones. And we'd throw it away. And so we really feel like the ones that we had there, all 3 of us in Fantastic Lairs case, all 3 of us said, yeah, these are definitely ones that we want to write to. We're excited to write to them, and we think that they're useful. Grendel Route, I did the same thing where I had, I think, 20 or so adventure ideas and then narrowed them down to the 10 that I thought I really was excited about, that I thought people would really like, that had kind of an exciting hook, that, had all the fun that we expect. And they weren't, a big thing that I always keep in my mind whenever I'm designing any of this stuff is, what am I giving GMs that they can't do themselves, right? Like, what am I designing that they couldn't just make on their own? And that's obviously a really hard question, because
Or
many GMs do make it all on their own and
yeah,
don't ever
or
buy
they
it.
have no time to do, because
Or they have no
drawing
time,
maps,
right?
describing
Yeah,
rooms,
right.
creating NPCs,
Yeah. I mean, the
items,
big ones are like,
monsters.
nobody's going to spend $20,000 on artwork, right? Like, they're just not. So
Yeah.
you're like, well, I can do that, right? I can put a lot of resources towards and commission really good artists to make art that you would not be able to just, be able to whip up on your own, or that would be better than something these days, that better than something you'd whip up on ChatGPT, and actually throw into a book. Maps, like you say, good, well-designed maps, right? Maps that are fun to navigate, maps that offer interesting decisions for characters to make.
Yeah.
Was a process that I learned through. I don't really know how much of that I had in mind, and I'd have to go look at the maps themselves for Fantastic Adventures, because I never really was clued into the idea of, like, maps that are designed in the style of Janelle J. Quay's, with level changes and secret passageways and loopbacks and, kind of interesting things. Will Doyle, excellent designer who has worked for Wizards of the Coast on a bunch of stuff, had really good map ideas of, like, can you show the end but not let them get there until they've accomplished other things? These kind of neat design ideas for physical locations.
Hmm.
I don't think I had those in mind early on. Grendelroot I did, more so, but I think even now, even more so now, I have these ideas in mind. But now I look at him and I'm like, well, I'm going to go take a look at the maps that Dyson Logos is making, because his maps are excellent and he's got 1,000 of them for free. So you can go look at those designs and learn a lot from the designs that he's been putting out, a ton. So yeah, and most recently, the thing from a design perspective that has helped me considerably, and I've done this now for 2 books and kind of a third, is I have a very healthy group of patrons that like the work that I do, but are going to push back on it as well and offer very good, useful feedback. And for me to be able to release stuff on Patreon in small bits and get feedback from them, and iterate on that feedback, and then expand it a little more, and then put that back out there and get feedback on that, and have this, like, cyclic loop of producing
Polishing.
stuff
Yeah.
and getting feedback on it, I think has made way stronger products. Like, Lazy DM's Companion is a much stronger product, because all of the stuff that's in that book had been released literally 1 page at a time over, like, a year period.
Hmm.
And I got feedback on every single page, which is different than, like, making a big thing and then putting it out there and saying, now play test it. And City of Arches has been that same way, that, like, as the city has expanded significantly from the first 10 pages that I put out, but it's been based on feedback that I've gotten from people about what they like, what they don't like, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, how does this thing grow, has been just priceless. Like, the product wouldn't be nearly as good if I hadn't been going through that process. So that's
Hmm.
been a new style that's helped me, significantly with the book
Great.
that I made.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
this.
thanks. Kind of similar to our approach, actually, because we do the survey-based
Yeah, right.
adventures. So,
Yep.
Which is of course, a positive kind of feedback mechanism, that we find out, what plot twist people actually want in the adventure, and
Mhm.
obviously, if we include that, then they're gonna like it.
Right.
So, that's very similar,
But
I think. And I also feel that the feedback kind of mechanisms are super important.
but
Yeah.
tell Tommy how we do this.
Well, we're a little bit different, because as Mike said, we make massive
Yeah, huge
campaigns,
books,
so
right?
which is actually obviously not preferred by everybody. It's because people might not have time to play, a 900 pager for 2 years.
But I think this
Or
reflects our preferences. So your
this is
question was,
our this is our preference.
what sort of adventures we like? We always enjoy these long campaigns where you can evolve
And that are very
detailed.
intricate, and our main thing is I think sandbox adventures, which lend themselves to huge areas with many locations, and all of them kind of interconnected, and building a whole world in sandboxes, and connected by main plot threads and side quests, and everything with something unique. So I think another one for us which is very important, is that to keep it fresh, because all of us have been playing for, me and Gabor, for 30 plus years. So we always see the same monster, there's a limited number of elements that you can work with, but of course it's infinite, so we can always put some kind of twist on things,
Yeah,
to keep it fresh. So
that's also because we work by the SRD, so we have limited space for new monsters, which we also create, but we have to work with the troll. So let's make it a mutant troll with 3 arms,
Yep.
and all of that. Either build a character around it, or add the new feature, or make it a sub variant, or something like that. Yeah, go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and just in terms of process, so our process is, of course, we start with the survey. We have a plot concept, that we come up with, and then a story flow. We start from the plot, and then lately we've been doing, flow charts to kind of connect the plot threads to each other, and then we go into several rounds of concepting and adding details and changing things, and so but very fluid. It's a fluid process for us, and obviously we're the counterexample to a big conglomerate, is because there's 2 of us with Gabor, so we're basically the ones that come up with everything, and we can easily change everything because of that.
It's really strange for me that Wizards can. I'm really not into. I really don't want to take time and go into discussing how possibly Wizards works, but it's really strange that they can go back and can go a higher level back and say, look, this ain't gonna work, so let's come up with something smoother. We do this many times. We have antagonists who have either a subclass or something that hides their true identities, or they cannot be divined, or all that, but hanging the whole adventure on such a measly idea is not really a good one. I mean, they should, and everybody should work better.
It makes the whole thing brittle, right?
Yeah.
And when you have you don't want to have an adventure where one thing or one bit of knowledge
ruins everything,
ruin the whole thing, right?
Yeah. But are you a discovery writer? Are you like changing everything as you move along, or you have the? I mean, if we focus, you told us how, when, and what books, but if you focus, let's zoom in on one adventure, or just one adventure in general, to put it so. Or you sit down, you're in the bathtub, you're thinking, on the beach, I don't know where, if you have a beach next to you or whatever, walking the dog or whatever.
Yeah, walking in the woods.
Walking in the woods, that's what we do here as well. So herding children around. But when you have these, I will write this story. So what do you have first? Because for us, it was very easy with the... before you answer, can I just give you a hint on what I'm trying to ask here?
Yeah.
So we were playing, and we said, okay, let's we cannot play enough. We need to make this our work. Okay, so that's why this way we could do something with do it a lot, yeah. And then, okay, what to write, and then we had this discussion, and then we could not decide, and said, okay, let's make a survey and see what other people like. That's simple as that. And then they constrained our infinite creativity into boundaries. They said they want dark angels to be the creatures ruling the ancient times. And then we were okay, good one. And then we worked with all that. So that constrained us, and then we have created, actually based on the survey, we have created the regions, and whenever we write an adventure, now this is where I want to get to, we already know, okay, this is going to be an urban something. This is going to be a sea adventure. This is going to be a regular fantasy kingdom. This is going to be barbarians on the mountains. So we have that constraint already. So how do you come up with the idea, and how do you see the whole process through? Do you already have the complete? I will tell you in a moment, or Tommy will tell you. I will tell you in a moment how we do it. But I'm really interested to hear, and maybe hopefully our viewers are also interested in learning from you how you literally craft hammer, iron, anvil. What do you do? How do you do it from scratch?
Well, sure. So specifically for adventures, I feel like I'm pretty boring about it, because I have a particular I have like adventure structures that I keep in my mind that I think work well. And we were talking about the whole idea of like leaving blanks. And I feel I actually had a when I was doing some freelance work for Wizards of the Coast back in the 4th edition days, one of their producers kind of gave me a thing where like I made a funny name for a NPC that I liked, and he just wrote a note back and said, players are going to come up with their funny names on their own. You don't need to give them one, right? Like they're going to run with that. And that bit of information kind of expanded out even further into like a lot of times the levels of complexity that can hit an adventure are brought on by how it plays out at the table, more so than what the author puts into the adventure itself. So my adventure structures, and again, I don't write a lot of it. I mean, I say I have a few dozen, so I guess it's not none. But like I don't write those big sprawling ones, right? I don't have huge plots other than these campaign guides that I do write, and that might be something to look into, something to dive into a little bit more. But for adventures, like I'm a big location-based adventure writer. I really like having an interesting location, and I often follow the model of like the characters are hired by an NPC to go do a thing at a place, right? And that structure of NPC hires the characters to go to a location and accomplish something. Is like the model that I use for like pretty much.
But that's the hook. That's a separate thing. So you start from location.
Yeah, but it spells out like what they're doing and why can be, can sort of grow. So an example of like a Grendelroot adventure that I've got had a priest. There's this the whole concept of the Grendelroot is that there's this weird, almost black stone-like root structure that has laced through this giant mountain, and the stonework of this weird laced, like they're almost like tendrils or tentacles, but they're frozen in place, is that they're unbreakable. You can't shatter them. You can't break them. And anybody who would might collapse the entire mountain, right? It's like a root structure that's all through this mountain. So one of the adventures is like, hey, we found out that there's a priest and he thinks he's going to be able to break these things. He showed that he can, and he's headed to this big central column in the center of the mountain. And if he accomplishes what he does, it could collapse the entire mountain down. He thinks it has to be done because he thinks that these roots are part of an elder evil. So, stop him somehow. And, that's like the premise of the adventure. And then I like, okay, what does the map look like of the location? And what are some interesting encounters that the players might run into while they're making their way to the priest? And then the situation with the priest can go a few different ways, because he's not really a bad guy. He just he thinks that this is evil. And he thinks like, if we don't do this now, it's going to be far worse. So we need to do it. But you also think, like, yeah, but if you do it, you're going to destroy the whole town full of people that we love.
Yeah.
So there's lots of like interesting ways that the characters can kind of work. You kind of work with them. But pretty much all the adventures kind of have that core structure, and then I fill out that structure. What is it that they're trying to accomplish at the place? What does the location itself, like, what is interesting about the place that they're going to? What was it before? What is it now? What are the who are the antagonists that you're going to have to deal with? These are all kinds of questions that I then fill out and then look at it and say, is this interesting enough that a GM couldn't have just made this up on their own quickly? Right. So like, I want to know that the thing that I made is interesting and unique enough that somebody would read it and go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I want to run that. Right. And yet still have common elements. Like, you're going to an old crypt where a vampire is hanging out, right? Only the crypt where the vampire is hanging out has a town around it, and she's been feeding off of the town for centuries. They know she's been feeding off of them, but that's the symbiotic relationship that they have. She gives them greater power and extra life, and they give her, nice, fresh, tasty blood. And then you're involved, and it's like, do you keep, do you stop this symbiotic
They break the
relationship?
status quo, yeah.
Right. And so,
Mhm.
I try to come up and look at whatever the end result is. But I think, yeah, when I would sit down and, I'm thinking Ruins of the Grendel Root is the one that I'm thinking about, where like I would write basically a paragraph to start to say, what is this adventure about? And then I'd look at the paragraph and say, is that cool enough to then take to the next step? Is that cool enough to, flesh out the location, flesh out the story that's going on there? But I do have a pretty firm grasp on the idea of like keeping, because again, I don't write giant sprawling campaign adventures. Typically write shorter adventures when they're adventures at all. Um, is it straightforward enough that a DM can get their hands around it and say, yeah, I know what this is about, and I can
Mhm.
run this, and that'll be, it won't be hard for me to run. And they're resilient, right? That the adventures themselves aren't going to be, they're not going to fall apart because one thing happened, right? They're not going to,
Like finding out that Mordenkainen
yeah,
is the bad guy.
finding out that Mordenkainen is the bad guy. So I have some where like you discover that somebody wasn't who they said they were going to be, but the way you don't have really an option. The way that it's coming about, you don't have an option other than discovering it after the fact, because they're not even around, right?
Mhm.
They're not like hanging out with you and they're your pal, and then aha, I'm actually a secret assassin of the Blood Order, the Blood Elves. It's like, no, you found out that there was a priestess who was at this temple and had been there for 100 years. She's an elven priestess. And it turns out that before that 100 years, she was known as the King Killer because she was an assassin that killed numerous kings. And now some kids vandalized her place, and now she's going to go hunt those kids down and kill them. You don't get a chance to intercept her before she started doing the things that she's doing. You're kind of following the trail
Yeah.
of what she's done, discovering these elements as you go until the final confrontation.
Okay, so
Yeah.
basically, you get inspired by a location and an end result of a story that will work, that will play out, and you fill in the gaps in between your hook and the end result, and then figure out what works best and what is least probably
Yeah,
good.
I don't really. So one thing I try to avoid, and I don't know that I've avoided this completely, is I don't think about a story, right? I don't think about an arc that is going to occur. I don't want to. I probably do, but I don't want to. I want to think about setting things up. I want to set up a
Create a
situation.
problem that
I
needs to
want to
be
create the
solved.
problem and create the environment around it,
Yeah.
and then give the GM and the players the freedom to figure out what they're going to do. So I don't
Yeah,
know how the characters are going to deal with the priest
of
who's
course.
trying to blow up the
Yeah,
big
yeah.
central
This
pillar.
is our philosophy as well.
Yeah,
We
that
set
I
up
just
the
want to
problem,
set it up and then let
deal
them
with it.
run.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I've even, sorry, I was just one more thing. So
Yeah, go ahead.
I've even taken it to a new stage where I have two new things that I've worked on, both for the City of Arches. One of them I think will almost certainly be in the book. The other one maybe, depending on what page count looks like, which are like adventure toolkits. And so an adventure toolkit, it doesn't have everything tied together, but it has like a central location and descriptions of all of the different areas of the location. It's got inhabitants and the behaviors of those inhabitants at the location, but not necessarily spelled out room by room. It has hooks on why the characters might go to this location. And it has sort of like situations and things that could evolve depending on how things go, but they're all separate from one another, so that
Mhm.
you don't, instead of the typical adventure design where you go into a chamber and there's 3 orcs that are there playing cards, you instead say, well, here's what the chamber looks like, and then over here there's so many orcs that are often inhabiting this place, and they could be in any of these locations.
Mhm.
And I'm offering it all up to GMs to say, now I have this setting and this place, and I have the inhabitants, and I have like random tables for what could happen in different chambers, and I've got reasons why the characters might go here, and then they piece together the adventure that they want to run from all of those pieces.
Mhm.
They've got the location pre-done, they've got the situation pre-done, they have secrets and clues. Big thing from my return to Lazy Dungeon Master of what are information the characters might discover when they explore this place, regardless of where they go.
Yeah.
And it's all split out into those separate pieces so that you can build it. And I've written 2 of them. One of them I've now run a couple of times, And it works well for me because I can use the same scenario multiple times, and it plays out in totally different ways.
Mhm.
So one of them is like a noble house, and the woman who runs the noble house is like an evil cultist kind of person. But one time you might go there, she's running a big party for all the hoi polloi of the city, and your job is to kind of investigate what's going on at the manor while this big party is going on. But in another one, she might be bringing all of her secret cult people down into the basement to go do some terrible thing, and you have to infiltrate it, and there isn't a party going.
Mhm.
So there's different ways that you can approach this one location depending on the hooks and depending on the situation, which could evolve. And I like that structure a lot. And the people that I've offered it to, patrons of Sly Flourish, who have seen it, like it. And I'm eager to kind of put it into City of Arches and see how that goes. But that's been another way that I've been thinking about this whole
Yeah.
design.
I think this works perfectly well, and this is very similar again to what we're doing on probably a longer campaign level, where you need to evolve the story into new phases. Basically, we either do that with locations, or we either do that with certain events that change the status quo or the flow of the story. But I just wanted to tell you how we do it, because
Yeah,
it
please.
might be interesting to you, and very similar. But again, we start from the survey, we get inspired, and our creativity gets bound by these answers that we get. So now we have to work with those, and it's always fun that they throw up these volleyballs which we hit, and we do the same back to them in our adventures, where we leave some minor parts open. What is this tower on the shore? No entrance, and that's it. And then players come up with their ideas for that, or a name, how he gets the name, or why is this and that. We leave. Actually, we took this. I think we learned this, or we get soaked in this, basically in Forgotten Realms, the campaign setting, where it was all little open hooks, that you could incorporate into a complete adventure. They just left these half sentences there, which is perfectly inspiring, and the DM could work with. But we go with the location the same way. We create the location. We know that this is a sea adventure. There's going to be an island. It's going to be ruled by half dragon slavers, and then we start to incorporate, put in front of us all of these survey feedback, information, and try to weave it into a single story. And we, of course, based on this, we create the location itself, so the world building, which is basically the environments, the threat, religions, ecology, economy, all of these stuff. How do they trade? What they trade with gemstones. They don't use coins or something like that. What's the law of the land, and who are the ones who keep the law, and enforce the law, and then we go to the plots and try to, which is actually the hardest to pull, especially on a long campaign, where we usually run, not like you, that we have an umbrella stuff that they are each separate, connected with this town that you just mentioned, and then there's few or not even any connection between these, but we need to, of course, create a sandbox and create we usually create several plots that are stretched all over these, I don't know, literally hundreds of places, all building up your information about and advancing the story on all three lines simultaneously. Some of these main plots come together, some, maybe one of them just self-contained, going on its own, or has its repercussion of the other two, or whatever. But these plots evolve through subplots and encounters, and even these little volleyballs we throw, like a little piece of information in the corner of the room that you can find and adds to your. So of course it's a sandbox, so you won't probably find all of them, but we try to give you 80% of it through as you progress, so that you can find your way and resolve the story. And of course we had, based on these surveys, and they request to have all of the villains to be paladins all the time. I don't know why. But we create these paladins and all these villains and factions, and of course the villains, the allies, we put them into factions, the neutrals, the neutral factions, and try to spice the whole already setting with these. So for example, the new adventure, urban adventure, here in Europe we have this. I don't know if it's just Eastern Europe or the rest of Europe or wherever, maybe even the world. We have this thing that once a year you put all of your stuff out on the street, like all of your unused sofas, not everything that you can't throw in the bin, like big stuff, like
Garbage day.
Like what?
Yeah.
Well, it's like a garbage day.
Yeah, garbage day. So like you put all your sofas and ruined television and fridge and all that out in the streets. So we were like, okay, maybe they do this in this urban adventures, and we always have people who come up and try to dig some treasure out of it. Like
right,
some do it for fun, but some do it for a living. They take the metal out of it or whatever. So we created this faction in the city setting, in the urban setting, that the hoarders are, going around and collecting, like reaching into your garbage can and looking for stuff you threw out, being super annoying and trying
and calling dibs on the garbage,
and selling stuff back to you, and maybe you can find treasures with them that they don't even know how valuable they,
sell you back the stuff you threw away.
Yeah, exactly. So creating, everything comes together, but we need to separate world building. Maybe so I was watching too much Brandon Sanderson lately, but he put it really nice, the world building, the characters and the plot. But that's what we do. We and then that's how we build this up, and as you said, leaving the blanks is very important. We leave little things, and we add we always try to add some flavor. Like in Crown the Oathbreaker, we had the mass combats, and in the seafaring adventure, we had the naval combat. Now, in this upcoming adventure, we have running the business, which is, an encounter table, some rules, some roles. You get lucky, you get unlucky, you do this well, your trade, whatever, and then you can run a business, and in your downtime, you can earn money. But that's just an extra flavor that, could add to the whole, of the feeling of an urban adventure or a naval combat to a seafaring adventure. Yeah.
Is it the two of you writing, or do you like how really you guys write all of it?
Yes.
That's the two of you?
Yeah. We write it, we run it.
How long does it take you to write like something like Torn of the Spell Hoarder? I mean, it's huge.
It's like a year, about a year.
About a year, and then you also, of course, during this year we do and this is one of your questions. Maybe we can progress to the next question, which is pretty similar: how to construct large adventures and what's the art process, which I might answer.
Yeah, because it's so much art.
Tommy can do so. But basically, it involves everything. So like, it's not just writing. Of course, we brief the designers, we run the website, we do the logistics, we do the printing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Well, we don't draw, so that we have, and we have.
Right. You commission the art.
Yeah, and we had to have one guy who's working with us, a fantastic young guy called Tony, who does the support, because that became quite, exaggerating too. And I'm sorry, not exaggerating, exhausting to handle.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, like Torn of the Spell Hoarder is like it looks like it's about 200,000 words. Is that?
We never counted it. It's 500 pages.
I did. I just stuck it into a word count.
There's about,
we will do that.
In terms of art, I know it has 1,500 hours worth of art.
Wow. Yeah. How many pieces? Do you know how many total pieces of art are in Torn of the Spell Hoarder?
I think like 450.
450 pieces of art. That's amazing. I mean, because so my wife and I run Flourish, right? We're working together, and I have other partners that I work with to do a lot of this, and it's not even close to that, right? Like,
it's tiring. It's a lot, but again, it works so that as for you as the art process, maybe Tommy can drop it.
Yeah, I can go into that.
Sure. It's Christmas every day. Just too long, don't read.
It's actually for me at least, and I'm sure for Gabber as well. Writing for me, actually, the brainstorming phase of it is the funnest. So that's what I enjoy the most, coming up with the concepts and thinking about and
I love the details.
finalizing it. Writing is of course also super fun, and briefing the art and then having it materialize into a finished product, also super rewarding. So those are the three for me at least, the most
Mate, I tell you how
rewarding phases of the project.
I think Mike, you share the same experience with us. I mean, you have the same experience like we do. Like every time our designers in our shared chat drop a message, I drop the kid. I don't care about the oven being on. I'm just checking my mobile. What's next, and they show us this sketch and like, oh, wait, yeah, I don't care, you broke your leg, wait, I need to check this vampire design here, and then write immediately, okay, his fangs should be bigger and the cloak should be more like blood, and yeah, I see, yeah, it hurts a lot, I know, so it's such a great experience to have your thoughts and imagination materialized. Oh, such a hard word in English. So it's always really fun, and they are excellent. They work for Wizards. They do magic cards as well, so they are excellent designers.
Established artists
through the roof.
Let's go to our next question. Maybe that's all. Finish, please.
In terms of art, and this is, I don't know if it's unique to us, but it's definitely something that we put into the projects. Is that through our Kickstarters, we offer backers the chance to become NPCs.
I saw that. Right.
And our families.
And our families
and friends. And you wanna be in the book? Yeah. Okay. You'll be a sprite warrior. Okay. Cool.
Right.
and of course it's super nice to be in a book and immortalized in fantasy setting, but 100% I feel that the NPC pictures are way more lifelike because they're based on actual people.
That's interesting.
So it helps the art as well. So it's not only
maybe even the immersion.
That's really interesting.
Which I think it was
it's not always the Vallejo big-titted muscle chicks, standing above the slain dragon. So next question, which is very interesting and might be helpful to our kind viewers, also who want to DM high-level parties, how to defend yourself against high-level pieces, ruining your plot and saying, hey, I cast legend lore. I remove the crown when he sleeps, and I cast legend lore on his face,
Right.
More than Kanan is the killer.
Right.
So how do you do that? Because we have our
I don't.
How do you design for you don't?
So I don't, I'm thinking back. So we did write, that's not quite true. So in Fantastic Layers, we wrote layers all the way up to 20th level. They're kind of like tiny adventures, right? They were like three chamber adventures that, the intention was there was like a central boss and there was like a layer that you could drop into an existing adventure and sort of, you could build them out into bigger things if you wanted to. But they were really intended to be kind of small things. And we worked on a bunch of high level ones of those. Now, in that case, they were just big combat encounters. So we didn't have like, the risk of like, how do you run a murder mystery when you have somebody who could cast, the Polanier connections and talk to the gods and find out exactly what happened.
We're in the same situation with Torrents and Spellorder. You can download the free chapter, people. There's the mystery. You're 16th level, and we use the subclass. He's an agent, cult agent. He has these powers that you can't divine them. I mean, sometimes you're put into the corner. You don't have other options but to fight.
And so but I think to me, and it's not even necessarily at high level play. I think it can kind of happen at any level. I feel like good adventures, like you have to say like, well, what would happen if they found out early? Like, just pretend they do. Would the adventure still work? Would it still be interesting? And the example that I love to bring up wasn't one that I published, but one that I played, which was Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which was Wizards of the Coast adventures of seafaring stuff.
We know.
And they have a secret cult organization, the Crimson something or other Act. And they were kind of operating behind the scenes. And if you read the adventure, if you run that book can either be run as separate adventures independently or be run as a campaign. And I ran it as a campaign for 2 groups and really loved it. And one of the things that happened in one of the games was that they knew that there was like this. They knew that there were these 2 warring factions. What they didn't know is there's a 3rd secret faction that was involved. And I kind of in my head was like getting what that secret faction is doing behind the scenes. But at one point, the characters released a very old vampire who had been entombed beneath the city, like imprisoned beneath the city. And he was like, he's way more powerful than like anybody else in the town. And at one point, and half the players were like, oh, he's like a nice guy, he's not so bad. And the other half were like, I can't believe we released an elder vampire into this town. Like, what do you think he's going to do? Right? He's just going to kill everybody. And he said, look, you released me and I'm very grateful for that. So in return, I am not going to kill all the people in this town. I will only eat bad people. And they'll just be like bandits on the road who are causing problems. So I'll stay to your alignment, and just kill people you don't like. And then they were still like, I don't know if I trust this guy. And then at one point, the characters show up, and this wasn't like the characters found out. It was like me thinking, oh, this would be kind of fun. Like the vampire would immediately know who this secret cult was, right? Because like he could charm anybody. So he's like, so the characters show up at his manor, and he says, hey, I've got something for you. And they're like, what? He says, you remember her? And this woman comes out, and she's like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And they're like, oh yeah, she's the one that she works with the other dwarves in the area. And he's like, yeah, tell her who you really are. And she's like, yeah, I'm actually like second in command of this secret, the Scarlet Brotherhood. I'm second in command of the Scarlet Brotherhood. There's a secret organization. And here's a whole flow chart of all the people. And here's like where we hide out. And here is our secret plan.
Yeah.
Right. And the vampire's like smiling at her and looks over at the characters. The characters are like, oh my God. Like we completely disassembled this secret network because we allied with this vampire. And it made it way more fun. It was so much more interesting and more fun for them to have somebody who just completely destroyed all of the secrets of this secret organization.
Yeah.
And then the organization found out, and they're changing their behavior. So when you can kind of design it so that it doesn't matter if the characters find out or not, and that the whole story can still evolve in a new way, that to me is more fun and more interesting than saying like, no, it has to happen a certain way.
That's not gonna work ever if the DM wants to constrain the players into the base of this base of this game is twofold. The player decides what to do, and then the dice decides if it succeeds or not. And that's how this game is played. I will give word to Tommy in a sec, because I know he wants to tell something about how we consider high-level adventures. But this is the same. I just wanted to grab the opportunity to say that this is what you asked in your video. How do we manage, seafaring? Yeah.
Right. I was like
you could wind walk, and you could teleport, and you could turn into
in fairness, like I hadn't really read your whole.
It doesn't matter. It's the same. No worries. I tell you in a moment. All 500 pages of it. The thing is that it doesn't matter. We have a sandbox. The point is that you uncover a mystery, find some stuff, talk to the right people, maybe even meet the sub quests. They are fun. They are somehow few of them are interconnected. You just need to travel. You travel by ship. You travel by wind walk. You travel by whatever means. It doesn't matter. We even give in the story. We give you an apparatus of Kvalish. You can travel however you want, undersea, oversea, whatever. The random encounters will be different. You might not even meet them, because you're wind walking and super jet speeding through the realm. But you might miss naval combat, or you might want to land on a ship and help in naval combat because the DM evolves a situation into something like that. But it's not. You're not bound to travel with the ship at all, and that's the beauty of it, and that's the same stuff as you're saying.
I've run into like, so in Eberron, for example, I ran an Eberron campaign that I loved, and the characters got an airship, and you're like, well, I guess we don't have to worry about random encounters going along the road. You can find your airship, and then I'm like, well, but every so often you're gonna get attacked by like angry silver dragons or whatever that are
Or
flying
like
around the
a
area.
rock.
Right, or a rock. And I remember my players like, why do we spend all this money on this airship? We still get hit by random encounters. We should have just taken it apart.
You can't avoid it.
Right, and the guys on the road would have been far easier than these jackasses flying up here. So.
Actually, it was funny. I calculated how many hexes people can travel in Windwalk,
Yeah. Oh, really? With Windwalk.
And it came out to be like 32 per day. So.
Yeah.
Right,
And the whole map is like 50 hexes, 50 hexes across. So
yeah, I mean, and that's really a 5th edition thing, right? Like Shadow Dark, that never happens. Like Shadow Dark, like there, it's really interesting to play a different style of game where like light is always a problem, because in 5th edition, food never matters. Like once you hit like level 3, light never matters, food never matters.
If you have a priest, but you can.
Yeah.
I kind of like sometimes to play these survival adventures to go against, no food, it's cold.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's more the Tuhu RPGs that we play like that, but in mundane world. But yeah, that's also.
And we have a maxim with Gabor is. We always think, what would 4 dwarven barbarians do in this situation?
Yeah, when you ride the adventure.
So no magic, nothing. How do these guys solve it?
Yeah. We need to take care of those little dwarves all the time.
Do you think about the opposite of like what would?
Yeah,
for
wizards.
Of course.
What would wizards do?
We have to, and I think. Play testing definitely helps, so that's super important. That in terms of motivations and balancing and workarounds.
Yeah.
What would the legend and in Torrents, because it's a high level, we always had to think, what would the legend lore and reveal, and we even wrote it in. It's an option. So if you cast legend lore, you know everything.
Yeah,
and it doesn't hurt. More information, you can make better choices.
Yeah, we play this actual play video or series with these very nice friends of ours, and they are all non-casters basically. I mean, there's a paladin, there's a ranger, but they can get to information through spells, and it's always like, oh, they're missing out on so much information. So much, and they're like, okay, whatever. Okay, but they will find all that out. It's just they will find it out later through the game, learning from the game, not in advance, because all these legend lords and bards and wizards and sorcerers and warlocks and priests, they could easily get the information beforehand and adjust their story accordingly. So that's again, what players do, what characters they bring, what the dice rolls. And the story needs to be stable at all times, and that's I think a very important thing. There was
actually, Mike, you raised the character agency question. So how to influence?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah,
which touches on this topic.
Yeah. How do you?
How do I maintain character agency?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that idea of situation-based design helps, where thinking about instead of worrying about what the characters are going to do, just kind of setting up the situation overall so that whatever they do, there are options available to them to kind of navigate it. And some of those might be much more effective than others. I think like when you're trying to get something to fit into a certain amount of time, that can be tricky. Like, what if they find the secret entrance right away and they just get right to the boss and they skip 28 rooms of stuff, right? So a little bit of the design is kind of say like, okay, if they do bypass this, what happens? Or if they bypass it, is there a way that this can kind of turn around? I think that matters a lot. One of and I've talked about this in other ones, which is the idea of like lightning rods, that a lot of time, this is more of like a combat thing, but I think it can probably also relate to all of the different kind of capabilities that characters can bring, which is instead of trying to resist the things that characters bring to the table, you lean into them heavily. Mm-hmm. The common example is like throw tons of low level undead against clerics, right? Mm-hmm. Like let them have opportunities to cast Turn Undead and destroy 100 skeletons.
Yeah.
Throw your, put in huge creatures that have terrible charisma saving throws just to be banished, right? Because you want players to feel good about having banish and using banish, and also make it a tactical choice of like, we don't want to get hit by that. Like a rock is a really good one. A rock is a low charisma, high hitting 5e monster that's perfect for banish, right? Because it doesn't have legendary resistance, so it's not going to resist it. And that way you get rid of it for a while while you're doing whatever else you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think the same is true of like, there are characters who pick is it the alert feat that gives you like a +5 bonus on perception checks and
No
advantage on
surprise.
perception and +5 on your bonus on your passive. And like, it's not uncommon to have like passives of 21, right? Like a passive perception of 21. And in that case, you lean in by like showing them all of the stuff that they managed to avoid or the stuff they managed to discover because they made that choice.
Yeah.
Instead of saying like, oh, sorry, it was a DC 22, right? Like, instead of trying to resist, like, oh, I don't want them to learn the secret and they should still have to roll. It's like they made a choice to pick a feat and to put their ability scores all into an area so that they can learn a fair bit without having to make any roll.
Yeah.
Leaning into it. And I think that, from an adventure design standpoint, I think there are options. It works better at the table itself because you know what your players are bringing, and you can't really say, I mean, I guess you could offer things like, here's an encounter where, if they're going to want to use area of effect spells because there's going to be a lot of small dudes, and then they're going to want to use crowd control on these great big dudes. You could put advice like that in there, and you could also say, like, especially for higher level stuff. I mean, there's a reason why I don't write a lot of high level stuff, and that's because it's just easier to write low level stuff. And that you could write in things of like, look, if people are able to discover this easily, this is where it goes, instead of like forcing it down that one path again, right? And then sort of saying like, oh no, like you can't, for some reason you can't use Speak with Dead to figure out what happened. It's like, no, just assume Speak with Dead would work, and then what would they learn? What would they learn from that?
Yeah,
I think dynamic secrets and clues also help with this. The idea of like, here's a bunch of information the characters could learn without necessarily tying it to anything, means that a GM can drop those in when the players do come up with creative ways to kind of learn information that you might not have even thought of. And in a published adventure, because you don't know who the characters are, it gives some flexibility to the GM to say, hey, however they figure this out, history checks or, talking to people or, legend and lore spells or whatever, can reveal whichever of these secrets you think might be relevant to the situation.
I really consider these as loose ends, like the Speak with Dead or the divination spells, and you just need to give some advice to your readers on what will happen if this is discovered, so that they are not left without any ideas, as a DM, to how this will ruin or not ruin, what information in the future, especially in case of a 900-page book or 500-page book, what future information they miss that will so we always tie these loose ends and give advice on how to use them. And
but I have to say that as a DM, I love giving out information. So that's as much information as I'm happy to share the secrets with the players.
Yeah, they're designed to be discovered.
Yeah.
And they can make better decisions and they can make better plans and
sometimes it's too much when you have to give out like
20 pieces of information.
But a concrete example is when we played the Undermountain, Mad Mage Labyrinth thing. Gabber was the DM. I played a lore master, wizard, and every layer. We started with legend lore.
But it was fun. It was fun.
The funnest, because we knew, of course, this is what we do. This is what happened here.
And
full layout.
Yeah, and I didn't reveal everything, but I revealed enough to make it, interesting for them. so they could delve in, they could prepare, but there were some surprises left.
Sure. Yeah.
And inevitable things, whatever. There's a dragon in the middle. Well, there was no dragon, but there's a threat in the middle. There are drow here, and then.
Right.
And then, are you a big fan of drow? Did I notice well? Right.
Yeah. Right. Are you asking like that's what you asked in the game, or you're asking me if I'm a fan?
No, I'm just totally in medias res into this idea or thought. I just saw the design on your channel. You're writing Underdark Adventure. Like, are you into the Underdark a lot?
I like it. So I did it for Grendelroot in particular because I wanted to have like that central theme. I actually have a fun thing that I've been doing with Drow. I kind of picked it up a bit from Eberron. And I think it helps get away from sort of the problematic nature of Drow as a species. That they're all evil and they have a matriarchal society and a lot and everything like that.
Not all of them are evil.
Yeah, which is for me, I like to say drow are elves and they can look like elves. Their appearances are as widely, as wide in nature as elves are. And in some cases, you could be dealing with an elf who is actually a drow and not know it. Right. And drow is almost like more of and there could be, and that kind of gets, I don't know if that gets away from the idea of good drow, but like a drow of Loth wouldn't necessarily be someone that you'd be able to identify on sight unless they're wearing like all of their Loth gear, right?
Yeah,
if they got a big spider necklace, you have a good idea, like big Loth headdress. But that has been kind of more fun for me because I can have circumstances where there are people who are like, oh no, they're elves of Saloon and they're great. And it turns out actually, no, that's a lie. They're actually they're drow of Loth and you didn't know it. And so Eberron kind of did that a little bit. And I'm running a sort of a very loose Greyhawk setting now. And that's something that I added in there, which I think has made them far more interesting. Like instead of just the kind of complete, idea that there is a race who is fundamentally tied to Loth, which even Wizards of the Coast is getting away from now.
Yes, they are escaping.
But I think for me more interesting is the idea that like, and I'm doing this across the board. I do it with all of the species, orcs and hobgoblins and everybody else. Gnolls are an interesting one, but I think because I like the gnolls from Midgard from Kobold Press that they aren't. Gnolls don't necessarily have to be demonic spawn of Yeenagu, that they could be, they can have children too, is the idea that like your species, it's easy to kind of just say, look, orcs of Grumsh are a bunch of assholes, right? But like orcs of Tyr are not. and then it's who you believe and what you follow more so than how you were.
I was just asking because I don't know, we both actually started out with these Underdark and the Men's Barons and box set when we were like 12-year-old kids.
Yeah. I was the same way. Yeah.
And it influenced me so much. I love the Drow setting and what Mr. Salvatore did to this to my brain and my creativity and just to reflect on what you're saying, we also have this in our world. You can have we have the bugbear running the casino and the gnoll being the barmaid or whatever, so that they are not tied to their origins naturally, because it also spices up and mixes up
it does. It actually
the world a bit.
Beyond what I and I'm a good believer in making the game better representative game that people are comfortable playing in.
Or alignment,
but also
as well.
It also just makes it more fun. Right?
Yeah.
And so you can still have Menza Baranzan and Loth. And
of course, that's not forbidden for the Drow.
They can still do it.
Yeah, they can still do it if they want.
They're not the only ones, right? It's not like they're not all. They're not. Yeah, you don't have to say, oh, they're all bad. It's like, no, there's plenty of.
Yeah. There was a. I don't know if you want to reflect on the character agency question more, Tommy. But maybe we could move to the last question about keeping it fresh, which is especially when you're playing for 30 years. I mean, how long have you been playing RPGs?
About 35 years.
Yeah, same
36
here.
years, right?
So how do you keeping it fresh is always challenging, to say the least, and keeping every part of it fresh, the fresh dungeon, the fresh plot, the fresh character, the fresh world, the fresh monster. So we will tell you how we do it and what, and hopefully this will help others as well. What methodology we follow, where you can place into X and Y and Z to make it work. But how do you do this?
Yeah, for me, it's about the story and the lore, and I'm when I can wrap, and I think we do this in all of our games, when we can wrap them in new ideas of the story and the lore, it kind of makes everything fresh, right? That like I don't know how many freaking encounters I've had where the characters go after a bunch of cultists in an old temple, right? But it's a lot, right? And I've been doing that for 35 years. But when you talk about who they're worshiping and the weird masks that they wear and the strange stuff that they find in their books,
variability,
the weird rituals that they're involved in, right? Like all that stuff. Like, I mean, I've been playing with the same group for 20 years, in my home game, and they've I've got players who have literally been in 20 years worth of cult fights. And they still like it. Like we joke about it. We joke about, oh, hey, look, cults, right? Like, who'd have thought it?
Oh, in a new adventure, we will have cults. A lot of them. You will love them.
Well, and I love cults because like you never feel bad about killing them, right?
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about that, like you are what you do kind of idea, like cults are, depending on the cult, like it's sometimes it's fun to put cults where they don't really cause any harm, right? They're just weird, right? And they're like, oh, it's just weird, but I think there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, oh wait, no, they're throwing a baby in a pit. Maybe we should stop them, right? There you go. So, but I really think that lore helps. Setting helps a lot. Wrapping it in information about who the gods are and the history of the location and old wars and lots of different things that we can sort of wrap it around. And, I mean, Midgard, Kobold Press's Midgard, I've run a couple of campaigns in the Midgard setting now. And like, it's a pretty straightforward fantasy setting, but it's got some really interesting ideas to it. And I've run it for players that also have been playing for 35 years. And they're like, man, I love Midgard. Like, this setting is really cool. Like, there's a lot of new things, a lot of neat things, a lot of familiar things. Like, it has the whole Norse, one thing about Midgard is it has sort of like real world connections to lots of things. So the gods of the Southlands are very kind of, Egyptian-y sort of, Middle Eastern gods, and the ones of the North are very much sort of Norse gods, but slightly changed, like changed just enough that it's still, you still want to learn about it. I think that helps a lot. I think, like I was one adventure, I bashed a bunch of WotC adventures, but I'll point out one that I really like, which is Dragon of Stormwreck Isle is the new starter adventure in the starter set that they put out a couple years ago. And it could be super boring if it was like a bunch of characters are going around an island, going into caves and fighting Myconid and going to, a shipwreck and fighting zombies and ghouls and whatever. But that adventure did a really good job of introducing the dragon, the dragon gods, and introducing Orcus and introducing, like the lore of Forgotten Realms to brand new players, right? Brand new groups. And it means that even as I ran that adventure for people where I think like everybody there had played for 30 years and knew the Forgotten Realms like the back of their hands. And it was still fun for them to learn about these factions because their characters were learning about them for the first time. I think that really helped. And I think some advice that in our products that we could offer to GMs, sometimes you don't want to define something, you want to describe something. This is something I had reinforced in a game I ran recently, where like I was describing these bulbulous bellied, weird bipedal insect creatures that had spidery eyes and fingers that were too long and mandibles, and they're lumbering about, and everyone's like, God, what the hell are these? I'm like, ettercaps. Yeah. And they're like, oh, right? And it was like, but in the descriptions, the players didn't quite pick up what the hell these things were yet.
Yeah.
And it was scary until I accidentally wrote ettercap on my like little thing that keeps track of hit points. And like, oh, ettercaps. Right? And I'm like, if you describe this like hulking, tattooed, husked monstrosity who's wielding a axe the size of a carriage door in one hand, you're like, that's scary as hell. But if you say you're getting attacked by an ogre, They're like, oh, it's an ogre.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So being able to describe something instead of defining something can make things that we fought 100 times can still be interesting.
Yeah, and what we're playing around with very heavily is making the ogre limp, half-eyed. You know, maybe
Yeah,
put
right.
put,
Give
put
little details. Yeah.
yeah, put a little rule even around it. You know, if you
Yep.
you know, if you attack from the left, it's different than if you attack from the right
Yeah,
because it
right.
has the right eye. You know, and
Yep.
as I said, I mentioned the troll that is a mutant and has 3 arms,
Right.
and we also have actor caps, and then we just made it large. You know, so
Right. That was really scary.
yeah, and playing around, and this is just monsters, and we're not
Yeah,
only
sure.
talking monsters. So when you're designing dungeons, I think for me, it's dungeons the most problematic, most challenging, because you need to come up with something really fresh. You know, we had the rock nest with the baby chicks in it in Crown of the Oathbreaker, and you're running like inside the nest, and they can pick you out, and there's somebody living in the rock's nest actually, making a little space for herself, or even the gibbering mouther dungeon, which is a gigantic gibbering mouther, which actually was, of course, again inspired by the survey because they said they want something living to be the dungeon. But you know, you can't come up with coming up with a second living entity or you know some sort of a creature to be inside is not such a good. I mean, in the next book, if you have another whatever that you can be inside, is not really that fun. So you need to come up with something totally new and also populate it well and put it into the adventure. That's really challenging for me, at least. But we manage, and yeah, and I think when I said XYZ, it's always basically I can break it down to one thing: the variations that need to be implemented, because that's very important.
Mhm.
I think.
But we always include a mimic of some sort in our adventures, and always some were
creature,
creature is always a new one.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely cultists. I riddle
cultists.
everything I
We
do with
also love cultists. We have cultists all around
Yeah.
our adventure. And
Always.
again, the next one, Scepter of the Lightbringer, is going to be about basically 2 cults racing against each other, and the player needs to be in middle and race against both. And
Yeah, that's
and
perfect. Yeah.
lots of cults involved. So yeah, well, I think we have gone through our questions. Any other questions you might have? We still have some time.
No, I mean, I'm in awe of the products you put out for the two of you and for the time that you put into them. That's fantastic. Like they're really cool, really cool products. I really like them.
Yeah. Opinion this. Yeah, we love the game, as you can see. As
sure, yeah,
you do as well, and our viewers as well. We just love it, and we love to create, and we hope that we can get our community involved, you know, through the surveys, through our Discord feedback, through our little small group but play tests, and get all incorporated into everything, and incorporate every feedback into one, as you do with Patreon.
Yep.
And do it like a hive mind, like together, sort of.
It really helps getting that feedback.
Yeah,
I've often heard advice that says like you shouldn't get feedback too early in a process, but I don't know that I found that to be the case. Like I have enjoyed getting feedback as early as I can get it, and I've never found it to be too like demotivating to hurt a situation. It almost always
the other thing, and it's a form of feedback, is the game logs that we read on Discord. You know, people playing Crown of the Oathbreaker mostly still, into it being super long and taking them years, and all the, you know, how they sorted stuff out, and how certain situations evolved, and how players solved certain, you know, there's unlimited number of solutions,
and it's lovely that it's always different. You know,
it's always different.
It's different for everybody.
And that teaches us, you know, how this volleyball we throw, how they spike it, and where it bounces, and what results that has. And okay, we will incorporate this knowledge into the next one, and hopefully get better ourselves, like our dear viewers are getting more experienced and informed by watching us in Mind Blast. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you bet. This has been a great time.
Let's do this sometimes again.
You bet. You bet.
And thank you for all of our kind viewers. Please subscribe and like and spread the word. Join us next time. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye, guys.
Take care, guys.
Take care. Bye bye.